When I first set out to write the Whitechapel Murders 1888 and the myth of the disappearing man, I had absolutely no perception or realization of what was going to come out of it, other than probably the same kind of perception that most people have, that they rely on details that they've heard here and there, the many films, and the overall false picture of Jack the Ripper. And I think you can see it in the writing, that it moves along in a certain way, and then suddenly the atmosphere changes, and the tone of things change, and it sets out in a different direction from how it's been going. And that's precisely how it was as I was writing, and I sensed that, and I thought I would keep that in, because it's a kind of marker to when the realization hit me. And it really was like that. It was a sudden moment when it kind of like lifted off me. And I know people say this about different things, when they say that weights are sometimes lifted off them. And it really actually felt like that when I felt it literally lifting off me. And that alone is how I knew that I was on the right track. Because at the same time, I was telling myself, no, this can't be true, and 130 years of historians and ripperologists can't have missed this. How is that possible? So there were the doubts that I kept telling myself, but when it lifted off my shoulders and away from my head, that's how I knew that no matter what I was telling myself, my subconscious was also telling me that you did it. You have changed history with this. And even though people won't believe it, or they'll dismiss it, you know that it's right, and you become kind of definite that that's what it is, and that there's no other way you can look at this, unless you kind of like bend reality, and as people do, but because you get two kind of like people in the Jack the Ripper world, where you have the people who are just interested in it and looking into it. But then you have these other people who are entrenched in this quest to define who Jack the Ripper was. And nothing will change them about it. And these are the people that I refer to as the flat earthers. They're like flat earth people who believe that the earth is flat. They can't see around it. And they dismiss anything that isn't. You know, here's me saying that no, there was no... Jack the Ripper didn't exist. They can't have that because to them he does. He did exist. So what this was that actually lifted away from me was that I kind of instantly felt that I didn't have to search anymore. I didn't have to kind of like compulsively go over and over in my mind how could this happen and who did it and how did they do it and how did they get away with it. It was just a complete revelation, and that was the weight that lifted. The burden, history sometimes becomes a burden for historians, especially mysterious history. You know, a historian can get very involved and they need to define something. You know, say take an archaeologist, they can't just brush the top layer of soil and say, oh yeah, there's probably under here there's a mosaic. They have to get down to the mosaic, and that takes some doing. And so it was at that point that I kind of defined the disappearing man, or the myth of the disappearing man idea. Now, the way that I came into the whole thing was that, I've like most people, or anybody interested in the Jack the Ripper case, I think that the Jack the Ripper thing, it's not an appeal to people, but it attracts your attention. It it reaches out to you, and it's like a compulsion. It's like, look at this, and it's so mysterious. Get your head around this. So I think myself as an example, and I think many people are like this, they pick it up from an early age. They see it around, and you fall for the myths, and you think, wow, yeah, how could this man just appear and fly off with his cloak? And so, although I've had an interest in it, I can't say everybody has an interest in it because I don't know. I think most people might do, or they have an idea of it and an interest in the mystery of it. Not an obsession, and I was like that. I was not obsessed with Jack the Ripper at all. I knew it was there, and I did think it was odd, to say the least, and nasty. but I wasn't really obsessed with it. But I came about writing about it in the same way as I did with Rage. When I was writing Rage, I had an interest in that as well, and the process is very similar to the Jack the Ripper, where I would, be following my interests one night maybe, and then I'd come across some detail, and then that contradicted some other detail, and you build it with Rage and with the myth of the disappearing man. You build up this kind of like patchwork of misinformation, so you don't know what's right and what's wrong anyway, and you have to sort through it. You're sifting through it all the time. You think, well, why isn't there a resource that can be more definitive than this? And I tried to do that with Rage. And the same thing happened with the myth of the disappearing man. I thought, I'll write this because I'm fed up of the disinformation, the misinformation, and the contradictions. And I'll try and define it, and I'll give as many references as I can to what happened, and try and work it out. And the myth of the disappearing man sets out highlighting events. And I continued in a kind of like, well, this happened, and then that happened, and then that happened, and then that happened, in a kind of like chronological way. But all the time I found that I had to be as truthful as I could and as realistic as I could, and leave nothing out if I could. No matter how disturbing the information, it's all relevant, and if you leave something out, that might be the key, So, although I'm very disturbed by the details that were coming out, and the same in Rage, I was quite disturbed by as I was writing Rage, and the same with the Ripper Murders. It is very disturbing. But I had to set it all out and not leave anything out. And through that, I found myself profiling, compiling a profile of the type of person, the mentality of the person, what could have compelled them to do this, and so on. And I found that doing that, profiling it, was very important to how I developed the the final definition of who did this and why, because that's important as well. The profile of the person or the mindset of the person really defined why they were doing it. And all the time things were not making sense as usual with Jack the Ripper. But you keep going, and then you add a bit more profile and so on. And then, the penny drops. And that was it. But the thing is, I think the most important thing is that it wasn't, or it's not so much who did it and why they did it, but who didn't do it. That's pretty key to the Ripper mysteries, because, as I say, there's a lot of people who have these theories, and they're all flat Earth theories, all of them, and they tend to and as it happened, the police were the same at the time. They had these theories, flat Earth theories, about who did it, and that's where they went wrong. And as well then, as they do today, they pick on individuals. They target somebody, and they say, "Oh, this is a likely suspect. It's a man, so that's a likely suspect." And they go to extraordinary lengths to research this person and look for any details. They lived here, and it's only down the road, and they'll match anything to anything, and along the way, since the time, since 1888, a lot of people have been trashed by historians trying to pin the murders on these people, poets and Queen Victoria's relatives, you name it. If they had the slightest kind of sniff of connection, they'll start digging into it, and as I say, it's all flat Earth. They don't understand that. They can't understand it, and in the beginning, as I set out to write it, I was kind of open-minded, and I used to think, well, yeah, maybe there's even the people that they pick on. It's kind of there's some kind of sense to the connection. There's all kinds of weird connections that they bring up that could possibly be realistic. So I had that frame of mind where I didn't say no, I didn't say yes to any of them. But then I kind of, along the way, I was thinking, no, there's no way that could have happened, and then the clinching factor is the myth of the disappearing man itself. And that turns all Ripper theories into flat Earth. And I'm not saying that the murders didn't happen. I'm not saying this didn't happen. But the way it's been portrayed is a false reality that's been established. The murders happened, but they didn't happen in the way that people like to project the Jack the Ripper fantasy. And so what you can see from this is an overall picture that I didn't set out to establish who did commit the murders. That was very far away from my thinking. I was thinking that it's established by historians and the police and whoever else that a man did this in 1888, and no one knows why or who it was and how he got away with it. And there's a whole pile of suspects, a new one every so often. So I had that. I wasn't going to question that, actually. I thought that's established, and this thing about the canonical murders. And it was what happened was that I was given the information through looking into it. Information was made available to me that changed or questioned the going perception. I kind of discovered it, but the discovery was given to me. And that was a bit of a dilemma for me at the time. Because again, I'm thinking these canonical historians, who am I to say against what they say? But it's not a maybe. This happened. I'm setting out. This happened. This is what happened.